Life is too short to read bad books. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be talking about all of the books that I DNF'd in 2023. Alrighty, before I get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments how many books did you DNF this year. And it better be more than one, because DNFing is self-care. If you are new to the book community, DNFing means you did not finish the book. You put it down. You weren't jiving with it. You're allowed to do so. It's okay. Life is too short to read bad books. On that note, I DNF'd 19 books this year. So starting out in January, I only DNF'd 2 books. Not too bad way to start the year. For the first one, I DNF'd The Radleys by Matt Haig. I believe I picked this up for a author taste test of Matt Haig's stuff. And this one was following a family who are vampires, except the children don't actually know that. Somebody within the neighborhood finds out that this family is vampires and is trying to hunt them down. I do remember my biggest problem with this was the writing. I'm usually a big fan of short chapters. I don't mind alternating POVs, but when there are many characters and you have super short chapters plus alternating POVs, it's a bit too much and it becomes a little hard to keep track of everything. I couldn't connect to anybody and I was kind of having a hard time following the plot because we were bouncing all over the place. It was also weird that we're in so many of these characters' heads, but many of them are keeping secrets from us as the reader, which, you know, means that they're just talking very vaguely about the secret that they have from themselves, which I don't like as a trope in stories. This was a really interesting idea, but unfortunately just didn't really pan out for me. The next book that I DNF'd in January, though, was The Night That Gwen Stacy Died by Sarah Bruni. Or maybe just The Night Gwen Stacy Died. There was no that in it. Do you want it in my lap? No? You don't want? You can come up here. Okay. Faith is being very clingy, so we have a guess. This was a book that I picked up for the book club I do with a few friends, and initially I thought this was going to be tied to the Marvel universe in some way. It's not. Really, the only aspect of Gwen Stacy that exists is we are following a teenage girl who works at this mini mart, ends up falling for a guy who says his name is Peter Parker, but you know, that's not true. There was a weird age gap between them. Like, it was YA contemporary, so I just had a very hard time getting invested. The book for the most part felt very bland and I didn't really feel like it had much of a direction. I had no clue where this was going to go. I DNF'd that one, I think within like 60 pages. Thankfully in February though, I only had one DNF, and that was Head Over Heels by Hannah Ornstein, another book that I picked up for my personal book club I do with a few friends. However, this was already on my TBR, so it worked out pretty well. Unfortunately, pretty quickly I realized the writing style was not for me. There were these huge info dumps about the main character's life and a lot of focus on her ex-boyfriend that just didn't seem necessary. I also felt as though the romance was already a bit rushed. The big thing for me with romance is that if I am cringing, if I am uncomfortable, if I'm gagging over PDA, kisses, spicy scenes, that's not a good thing. I shouldn't be reading it, which is what happened here. I was cringing at their first kiss. That kind of told me I needed to put this down. Unfortunately, I had many DNFs in March, and that's because I do remember I was clinging onto the edge from falling into a reading slump. Starting at the top was The Little Shop of Found Things by Paula Braxton, which was a book that I actually borrowed from my SO's mom. It wasn't for me. This was one of those where it seemed like it was going to be all vibes, lots of aesthetic, and you know, usually I love those sort of books. This just wasn't keeping me engaged here. There were constantly these giant paragraphs describing food, clothing, buildings, the weather. I was just getting bored. The main character was Super Mary Sue, and the plot itself was sort of a Outlander retelling kind of thing, where our main character is living in modern day, but she has this ability where she touches things and can see their history, but eventually she starts to find things in this new house her mother and she moved into, where she touches them and she actually travels back in time. I don't really know. Outlander isn't my thing anyway, so reading a knockoff version, not really for me. I felt bad that I couldn't get into this when My SO's mom gave it 5 stars. After that was The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine, which was a thriller that I'd been really excited to get to because of the girl, I'm gonna steal your life story. That's how this was always pitched to me, and that intrigued me. However, I found that I couldn't root for the main character, and I think that's something I have a hard time with. I don't mind an unlikable character, but if I can't root for them, what's the point in me reading it? Because I'm never going to be engaged. I'm never going to enjoy reading their story if I can't root for them. I remember the reading experience of this book being quite a roller coaster of will I continue or will I not? Eventually I did decide to not. I had suspicions as to where this was going, so I looked it up and I was correct. And I'm not a fan of that. Yeah, no, I'm pretty glad I DNF'd it because I don't think I would have liked that flip. The next one though hurt a lot more. That was Stoneblind by Natalie Haynes, because I really enjoyed the first book I read by Natalie Haynes, 1,000 Ships. I read that one for my first Greek retellings, and I tried to read this one for my second. This is a Medusa retelling. You can put that together from the title and the cover. But unfortunately, I felt like Medusa was such a small character in the book. It really was more of a Perseus and Athene retelling. That wasn't what I went in wanting. Medusa, the titular character, still felt so insignificant. Haynes's writing is very strong. Her atmosphere work is phenomenal. I liked how she characterized some of the gods in this, but I was so let down about the fact that Medusa wasn't more of an integral player in her own story. I ended up DNFing this one, I think, shy of the halfway point. And then the last book that I DNF'd in March was also a Greek retelling, Phaedra by Laura Shepperson. This one was interesting in how it was written because it alternates back and forth between many a women's perspectives, including like the chorus. And once again, it felt like it was more focusing on all of these women and their ties to Theseus. There were so many different characters and I didn't really feel like their voices really changed between them. I also had a very, very hard time reading from Phaedra's perspective. I understand that it's pretty logical she was on the younger side while Theseus was 10, 15 years her senior. God, reading from her and her sounding like a 14-year-old was just really painful. Anytime she interacted with Theseus's son, it was like nails on a chalkboard to me. I also thought it was interesting that the author had introduced Medea, another female character who is often quite vilified in Greek stories. Again, I didn't feel like these female characters who the story is supposed to be focusing on were really that important, at least in the sections I was reading. It once again felt like their stories were revolving around the men, which, you know, that's what the original Greek myths did. I love Greek retellings, so when they don't hit, it hurts. It hurts me. The only book that I DNF'd in April also hurt me because it was from my owned TBR, and that was Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott, which is sold as a Baba Yaga retelling where we are following the descendants who inherit the house. I gave up on this one because of the characters. I absolutely detested the 2 Yaga siblings. The girl was a total pushover, doormat to her brother, who was the absolute freaking worst. I could not understand why the author made him so detestable. It's another one of those things where I couldn't root for him, so I had no care to follow his story. The flashbacks with Baba Yaga and the house, those were the most interesting, but unfortunately they were quite underutilized in comparison to the plot around the siblings, their puppet performance that they were putting on around the country. It was a weird book, okay? I only DNF'd one in May, and I remember this was for the Smut Den readathon, and I know I have a vlog for that, so I'll put a link in the cards. This one was Tiny Imperfections by Ali Frank and Asha Humans. This is a romance story, if I remember correctly, about a woman who's on the older side. She has a teenage daughter. I think I only got maybe an hour into the audio, and I just did not enjoy how this main character was being written. Her entire backstory is dumped on us in this giant monologue, but that monologue is happening while she's describing her relationship with her best friend. That was strange. She's bad-mouthing all of the parents at the school she works at for being snooty and pretentious. Meanwhile, when she's gossiping with her friend, she's acting and talking exactly like these parents that she was just looking down on for being snooty and pretentious. Perhaps that was the entire point. Maybe the authors were doing that on purpose. It just left a bad taste in my mouth. I wasn't interested after reading that, so I put it down pretty fast. Oh God. Oh, this next one hurts me. Master of Souls by Rinna Barron, which I DNF'd in July. And this is the third book in the Kingdom of Souls trilogy, which I really liked the first book. I really did. It develops so much from the small synopsis you have. It's talking about this young girl who does not have any magic, though both of her parents are very, very strong magic users. However, her mother is actually doing some very shady things to garner even more power, and our main character is determined to stop her, but in order to do so, she has to trade essence, her life essence, for magic. It develops so much more from that. The first book I really enjoyed. The second one kind of had middle book syndrome. This third one though was such a letdown. I was having such a hard time rooting for any of the characters because it seemed like they were just running in circles. They had no real plan to progress the plot forward, so I didn't understand what the author could possibly be planning. This also has one of those characters that's an immortal being, but he read like a teenage boy in like the most annoying way possible. Unfortunately, I just ended up losing steam with this one, so I DNF'd it around 30%, and I am still sad about it because that first book was so good. It had so much potential. The one other book that I DNF'd in July was The Last Mrs. Housewife by 𝗖cie RH𝗁𝗁. This was my first of her stuff, and unfortunately, I don't know if I'll check out anything else. This one was for Cults 5x5, which came out in October. Basically escaped a cult when she was in college and now is trying to investigate the mysterious death of her friend who also escaped said cult, and starts to learn that perhaps she had entered a new cult. This was really heavy, had a lot of trigger warnings. I felt like was starting to become a bit too gratuitous in the SA and scenes that were actually showcased on page. It was very anxiety inducing, it was very uncomfortable, but as far as like a mystery story goes, it felt as though the main character just very, very easily moving forward in her investigation. Like everything was just so simple. It just all fell into her lap. I also had a hard time in believing the background that we learn about our main character and how she got mixed up in this cult. Then there's like a budding romance between her and her childhood friend who's investigating this with her. At the same time, she's married and like super quickly explained that, oh, you know, her husband's a terrible person and she's just been reinforcing her trauma by being married to a man like this. But it felt like it had no actual ground to stand on. That annoyed me a lot. I ended up DNFing this one for my own mental health. And as I said, I don't know if I'll check out anything else by 𝗖cie RH//Winstead because how she was writing the mystery just didn't work for me. I had another two that I DNF'd in August, starting out with The Book of Gothel by Mary McMine. And this one it's supposed to be a Rapunzel retelling, focusing on Gothel, the woman who adopts Rapunzel. However, this book was just like, you wouldn't know it was based on Rapunzel if it didn't tell you. And then there was the setup of the story that we were following a woman is living in current times and investigating into the history of Gothel, but that's never seen again after the introduction chapter. Honestly, this was pretty boring. We're following the main character, who isn't even Gothel. Her name was 𝗖cie, if I remember correct. And we're kind of just watching her life unfold. But at no point does she ever feel like an actual driving force in the story. But then as soon as she starts to take action in the plot, as she starts to make her own decisions, they were completely moronic and it just drove me up a wall. And her plan also just went against everything we literally just watched her experience in her life. So I didn't understand the reasoning behind it. That really irritated me and was a big reason why I decided to put that one down. The other one I DNF'd was Inkblood Sister Scribe by Emma Torres. This one I picked up because it was following two sisters who are connected by like this magical library of their fathers, and all of the magic in this world is based in books, which is such a cool idea. Except I just couldn't get on with the writing. I didn't care about the characters. There was so much exposition around the characters and the magic, but somehow I still didn't really understand the magic and I did not care about the characters. The plot was moving so slowly, but I actually was already starting to make guesses at things that I thought were going to happen in the mysterious elements. When the first one was revealed and I was completely right, I kind of quickly could piece together everything else that was going to happen in the book. Checked out spoilery reviews and I was right. So yeah, I DNF'd that one at about 40% because I just didn't care. Another cult book that I DNF'd was The Girls by Emma Cline, which is such a shame because this was on my own TBR for a fair amount of time. It was a retelling of the Manson family, but our main character tells us pretty early on that yes, she was involved with the family, but she actually wasn't involved in the murders that take place. So it was kind of strange to me that we were even watching this unravel because she wasn't actually involved in what I would argue is the most interesting element of the story. The big thing though that really made me put this down was the author's handling of a SA scene and having the victim excuse it away. That was gross. No. I noped out pretty quickly after that. One that I feel like I've talked about a lot lately, Summer Shall Break by 𝗖cie RH/𝗁𝘁, which was the sequel to None Shall Sleep, a book that I really enjoyed, but unfortunately this one was such a letdown. Though the first book is sold as young adult Silence of the Lambs meets Criminal Minds, which I adored, it just wasn't working anymore. You have to suspend disbelief anytime you read a YA mystery or that the teenagers are the ones putting this all together, figuring this out, living through it. It was just pushing it a bit too far. Then there was like this one scene with the Hannibal Lecter character and his sister that gave me mad Flowers in the Attic vibes. DNF'd after that. One that I don't even know if I should really include it in because I barely got like 30 minutes into the audio. Cursed by Thomas Wheeler. It was a retelling of the King Arthur legends. I just felt nothing about it at all. I didn't care about the main character. The plot was so basic, so predictable, so every other YA fantasy book out there. And then I found out that apparently the book and the, was it a TV? I think it was a TV show, came out together, and it was basically just like a big marketing ploy for people to go watch the Netflix show. Yeah, I didn't like that, so I gave up. The one that still pains me, City of Brass by 𝗖cie Chalkboard. I'm still bummed that I didn't enjoy this because I just could not get into the characters. I didn't really know if I would actually care about watching all of the political intrigue unfold if I didn't care about the characters included in it. The setup of the story with 18th century Egypt and Middle Eastern folklore is awesome, right up my alley, but fortunately that was probably the biggest positive I had in the book, and that's not really enough to keep me reading a 500-page fantasy book that has 2 sequels. I only had one DNF in October, White Horse by Erica T. Worth, which is following a woman who is given this bracelet that apparently belonged to her mother who disappeared 2 days after her birth. And once our main character starts wearing it, she starts to see ghosts. I just didn't want to read another chapter about the main character sitting in a bar and drinking. So yeah, unfortunately I DNF'd this one, which, like I said, I'm still bummed about. My last DNF of the year was The Child Thief by Brom. And I'm still bummed about it because it was a Peter Pan retelling that's a horror book, and that is so cool. I was really hoping that this would, you know, showcase Peter Pan as the villain, as the child thief, but not quite. Instead, Peter is stealing these children to then fight in a war that's taking place in Neverland, because apparently this book is also sort of based on Arthurian legends. Really though, the reason I DNF'd this book, and I'll be completely honest with you, is because 80% of what I had read so far was swearing or descriptions of boobs. Why was that necessary? Every female character? Really? I also just had no tie to either of the main characters we were seeing. I had no emotional investment in the story, and I was already pushing like 30% in. When I look up reviews to decide whether or not to continue, and I have no interest in checking out the spoilery ones at all, that tells me that I just clearly don't care. So yeah. Glad I DNF'd that one because that book is over 600 pages. All right, so that is all 19 books that I DNF'd this year. If there's one that you really think I should return to, try. I'm not gonna make any guarantees that I will, but you can try and sell me on it. All right, y'all, so that is it for today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials, as well as a few ways you can support me, linked in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye.